What's up, GameLeapers? It's Panther, and today we're going to be going over some mid-game macro tips to help you close out your games faster and more consistently. If you haven't already, make sure you click the link in the description to check out our website. We've got over 100 hours of guides spanning just about every topic you could possibly want when it comes to League of Legends. We've got champion guides, lane guides, macro guides, and plenty more. So if you are looking for that next step in leveling up your gameplay, our website is going to be the best place for you. Now, without any further ado, let's get right into that first tip. This is going to be, make sure that you're actually going for the first Rift Herald and using it properly. Oftentimes, breaking that first tower, or when tower plates fall, is what signals the beginning of the mid-game. And so, if you are wanting to launch yourself into that mid-game early, the first Rift Herald is going to be the best way to do that. If you can take a first tower at 14 minutes, right before plates fall off, you're going to be putting yourself in a very good place for the upcoming mid-game. It's important to realize that this is a very proactive play. We're accelerating the game, we're trying to get the game to be played on our terms, but that doesn't mean that Rift Herald cannot be used in other manners. The way that I see Rift Herald is, so long as you hold Rift Herald, you're able to keep the priority of the game in your hands. You get to dictate the pace of the game. The enemy team cannot look for highly risky plays because you will always be able to punish by summoning the Rift Herald. This makes it very hard for the enemy mid laner to roam. It makes it hard for the enemy jungler to look for dives. It makes it hard for the enemy top laner to look for any risky plays because if they die, they lose their whole tower. You get the point. Simply holding the Rift Herald can make the enemy team play much safer because if they make a mistake, they're gonna lose their tower for it, and they don't want that. For this reason, when you see a risky play happening while you are holding the Rift Herald, you need to punish it. If your enemy mid laner roams and they look for a bot lane dive, a 4-man dive, spam ping that tower, get the jungler to come mid, summon the Rift Herald, and take the first tower. This is going to make it so that even though, sure, maybe they got 2 kills on that dive, you actually came out ahead as a team. The better you get at using the Rift Herald, the harder it is to be behind on priority while you hold it. You can hold it for a long time to deny a lot of proactive plays if you're playing against a very early game team, or you can just use it to accelerate your own game if you're playing the early game team. Obviously, there's a lot of different ways to use it, but the general premise is you want to make sure that you're using it in games as a proactive play when it is appropriate, or to deny proactivity. It's important to understand both sides of the same coin, because you don't always have the same style of team comp every single time. For example, if I have a Kayle top lane, I don't want to take the Rift Herald top lane and take her tower. It's going to open up her lane, make it much more dangerous for her to farm, right? I would much rather use Rift Herald to defend any proactive plays, stop the mid laner from roaming up to punish her, stop the jungler from looking for a dive, right? So you gotta understand both sides of the same coin if you want to be using Rift Herald to its fullest potential. Some games you want to accelerate the game, some games you want to slow it down. Understanding your win condition will help you make that decision, and since you can use Rift Herald pretty much in any way that you want, you're going to be able to use the Rift Herald in a better way than if you're just using it right after you pick it up in every single game. Second Rift Herald will be used in a completely different manner, but don't worry, we'll also cover that in this video later. For tip number 2, we're going to learn exactly how we want to be playing around Drakes, because Drake is the best win condition for lower elos. If you're able to get Drake Soul, that's a lot of power. It's going to allow you to teamfight better, go for picks better, do pretty much everything that you could possibly want to do better to help you close out that game in the late game when that comes around. Now, the first Drake, it's going to be early on into the game. It's typically only going to be done by the jungler and maybe the bot lane. This is the only Drake that really isn't a huge team play. It's just more about the jungler when they want to do it and the bot lane. Now, if it doesn't get done in the first 14-15 minutes, then it turns into more of a team play sort of thing. But typically, first Drake just going to be about the jungler soloing it or the bot lane helping once they have an opportunity. Now, if as a laner you see your jungler doing the Drake, the first Drake, you want to make sure that you are getting shove in your lanes. This is important because it's going to stop your laners from going to collapse on your jungler, and it's going to help your jungler get that Drake in a much safer way. If the enemy jungler goes to contest a Drake, it means that you can be the one to collapse on that Drake instead of the enemy laners collapsing on your jungler doing the Drake. If you have enough time, you can even go and help with the Drake, and it's just going to make it a much more guaranteed play as opposed to potentially losing the Drake and losing gold and EXP to the enemy jungler who kills your jungler when they do the Drake. Moving on from the first Drake though, the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, any number of Drakes are going to be played in the same exact way. First, you're going to want to look to get shove in your bot lane and your mid lane. Regardless of who is laning in that lane at the current time, you need shove in those lanes because, first of all, it's going to allow you to safely walk into the jungle from more angles. And second of all, it's going to allow you to deny creeps to towers if you get them shoved all the way to the towers, right? So the enemy team is going to have to either pick between the creeps or defending the Drake. Next, you want to make sure that you're walking into the Drake area as a team to get vision control. You're going to drop your vision, you're going to sweep out the enemy vision, and you want to make sure that you're doing that as a team, because if you don't do it as a team, if you're just sending your support in alone, they're probably just going to get picked and die, and then you have no vision, which makes it very hard to get into the Drake pit without somebody else getting picked and dying. It becomes a chain reaction, so make sure you're getting that shove, and then you're helping your support get vision control. If you're the one playing the side lane, either as a mid or a top laner, then you're going to want to make sure that you are opposite to the Drake. You're playing in that top lane. You're creating a slow push about 1:30 seconds before the Drake spawns and crashing that slow push about 30 seconds before the Drake spawns. This is going to allow you to teleport to the Drake and help your team with that vision while denying as many creeps as possible. And if the enemy top laner or mid laner decides to respond to that push, that means that they're going to get to the Drake late. If they decide to ignore it, then they lose minions. Either way, you gain something. If you did not take teleport, make sure that you are moving that timer up 30 seconds so that you are leaving the tower about a minute before Drake. This will give you plenty of time to reset, buy whatever you may need, and then walk to the Drake while still getting there about 30 seconds beforehand. Drake Soul is the single best win condition for lower elos, okay? You want to make sure you're getting as many Drakes as possible. Drake Soul does so much. Play for the Drake, don't ignore it. Now, for our third tip, do not continue AFK pushing after you take the tower. So many players that I coach, I will see continue to just run down their lane after they take the tower. This is bad for multiple reasons. First of all, you are overextending if you're pushing all the way to that tier 2. It's going to make you susceptible to ganks, and if you're the first one to take the tower, chances are you may even have a shutdown on you, right? You don't want to give the enemy team a way back into the game. For this reason, after you take the first tower, you're going to want to look to rotate elsewhere. This could be the enemy jungle. It could be a different lane to take another tower if somebody else is safe to lane in your lane, or it could be into your own jungle to take a few camps before going into that lane, right? You just want to look to get something else on top of what you already have. If you take your tower and you're just continuing to run down the lane and only farm your creeps, you're not getting any additional bonus from taking that tower. Then there was no point in taking that tower, right? You want to use that tower to open up the map to other opportunities, whether that's the enemy jungle, whether it's wards, maybe a different tower. Get yourself something from taking that tower. If you're just farming creeps after taking a tower, then you're not pushing that advantage and you're putting yourself at a larger risk. The best thing to do after you take a tower, in my opinion, is to try and look for deep vision into the enemy jungle. This is going to both help you stay safe, but it will also help the opposite side of the map stay safe. Because if you see the jungle on that deep ward, then the opposite side of the map knows the jungler isn't there. Whether or not they see this, well, that's completely a coin flip. But if they do see it, then they know they can play aggressive. Tip number 4 is going to go right off of that last tip, which is just to invade enemy camps when you have a lead and to place vision in the enemy jungle. Again, we very briefly touched on this already, but we can go a little bit more in depth. The jungler is the most impactful player in the game. So the idea is that starving them out or tracking them is going to make their job a lot harder. If the person who's in charge of Rift Herald, Drake, performing ganks, and a lot of the early to mid game macro is set behind or is denied any opportunities to make proactive plays, it's going to be a lot harder for them to do anything. For this reason, no matter what role you're playing, if you ever have an opportunity to place deep vision in the enemy jungle, or to invade and take camps and deny gold from the enemy jungle, you always want to look to try and do this in order to push your lead. In order to understand why this is important, first, let's just make things easy and pretend that every camp is worth the same amount of gold and EXP. They're not, but for simplicity's sake, let's pretend that they are. Now, if you have the opportunity to either look for your Gromp after doing your wolves, or to invade the enemy raptors, you should always look for the invade so long as it is safe. When it is safe to invade, we're going to get the same amount of gold from each camp, right? But if we take the enemy camp, we're also denying gold and EXP. This makes it so that anytime the jungler is doing something, you are punishing that. So they're not able to get off free ganks and all of their camps. They have to choose which one do they want, camps or ganks. For a lot of junglers, it's going to make them less likely to perform ganks when their camps are up because they know that they are going to get invaded and punished for it. And for some others, they're just going to fall completely behind in golden EXP, and that makes it very hard to perform successful ganks. Regardless, if you can stunt one player's growth on the enemy team, you always want it to be the enemy jungler when it comes to early and mid game. Invading and taking vision deep in the enemy jungle is the best way to do this, and that's why we see it so often done in both pro play and in incredibly high elo games like in Challenger, Grandmaster, etc. If this is the one thing that you can emulate from the highest level of play, you're going to see so much success from that one thing. There are so many other strategies that revolve around the same idea of denying gold, EXP, denying plays, but this is the easiest one to understand and to implement into your gameplay right away. This is why I brought it up. Finally, let's talk about the second herald. We already talked a bit about the first herald and herald in general, but let's talk about one specific way to use the second Rift Herald. And we did briefly touch on this, but it is to leverage a Drake. Now, this can be used as one of the largest gold swings in the entire game. The idea is you're pressuring multiple objectives at the same time, and they're very impactful objectives early on in the mid game. In scenarios where you have the second Rift Herald and the Drake is spawning, you always want to make sure that you save that Rift Herald for 30 to 15 seconds before the Drake spawns, summon it in the mid lane, and then immediately shove out that wave and go straight to Drake. In this scenario, you're going to be, first of all, crashing that Rift Herald into the mid lane tower. That's a huge chunk of damage, sometimes even the full tower, and then you will also get the Drake. Remember, they're going to be forced to defend that Rift Herald if they don't want to crash into another tower, so that's a free Drake for you. Now, in the scenario where you're not strong enough to fight the Drake, and they're just ignoring the Rift Herald, then you can also just ignore the Drake and push down mid lane with that Rift Herald. A lot of the time, you can get 2, sometimes even 3 towers by doing this, which is so much gold and pressure on the map. As you can see, there's no winning scenario for the enemy team when you're using Rift Herald like this. They either get the Drake and lose towers, or they get the towers, but they lose Drake. Either way, they're not coming out with a lead. They're simply stopping the bleeding as much as possible. And sometimes, if the enemy team is a complete train wreck, they'll try and fight you on the Drake while numbers down, lose the fight on the Drake, not take care of the Rift Herald. You can push the Rift Herald all the way to the tier 2. You can see how this very quickly snowballs out of control, and that is why it is such a consistent play that you should be trying to look for, because there really is no downside. Like, sure, you could mess up a team fight, but at the very least, you're still getting the Rift Herald crash, right? I almost never see this play made in lower elos, so it's something that I want you guys to look for in almost every game that you play. If you can secure that second Rift Herald and you can take it into the mid lane, summon it right before a Drake, you're going to see so much value from that one play. This is why I want you to ping all of your teammates to try and get them to make this play with you. If you're able to successfully make this play, you're going to take away so much in each and every game. It's going to increase your odds of winning by quite a bit. Now, to recap and simplify some of these concepts. First of all, you want to try and use the first Herald as a proactive play or to deny proactivity by the enemy team. You can use it as a response to get equal amount of plates during an enemy gank, or you can just use it to try and get the first tower or a few plates of your own. It's good to have a Herald play in mind. Once you pick up the Rift Herald, do not immediately summon it. If you're immediately summoning Rift Herald after you picking it up, you're using it wrong. Tip number 2, get to Drake early. Make sure 30 seconds early. That is the benchmark. If you can get there 30 seconds early, you're going to be in a good spot. 3, after you take your tower, don't keep AFK pushing. do something else. Continue to grow that gold and EXP lead, which leads right into 4. Make sure you're invading the enemy jungle for vision and for camps. It's the best way to get yourself an early lead and to stop the enemy jungler from snowballing the game out of control. Finally, number 5, we're going to want to use that second Rift Herald in order to create pressure for a Drake. If we use Rift Herald right before Drake, we're going to be able to a lot of times walk away with a lot of gold and sometimes even secure the game. That's all that I've got for you for today's video. I know it's a huge guide, so I would recommend writing these things down so that you can start using them in your games. As always, I'm Panther. I hope you learned something valuable, and I will see you in the next video.